Welcome to the People by People podcast with me, your host, Laura Sutherland. Once again, I am back. And this time I'm back with another solo episode. I've been quite busy on the old solo episode front, but I believe that some of the stuff I'm talking to you about is really important, and some of it comes from experience, through my working day or working with clients or talking to people in the industry. And I find that sometimes even just me recording these types of things, it sort of validates my thoughts, or it's kind of thinking out loud, or sharing it with you so you can make your own decisions, or you can even kind of come and talk to me about it further to help either formulate further ideas or change my mind in some way, shape or form. I don't know, but I do find that the podcast helps. It's actually almost better than writing blogs, although I still write the occasional blog. However, if you haven't seen my blog recently, you should go and see it. It's on auraadvisory.co. That's auraadvisory.co. And have a look at what I've been talking about recently to do with sustainability. The most recent blog was published today, and it was about being able to recycle your plastic bottles, etc., and get a 20p return on that. So that's just by the by. Thought I'd kick off by letting you know, just to go and check that out. But today I wanted to talk to you about something which I suppose is slightly frustrating, because it frustrates me that you work in public relations and you get pigeonholed. You work in public relations and people think they know what it means, but they don't know what it means. Or they think that you work in public relations, therefore all you do is media relations and that's all you should be doing, and that you shouldn't really be doing anything else. And this is like an age-old thing that our industry goes around and round and round and talks about what is it we do, what is our purpose, what's the explanation, and what's the description of what you do. But my interpretation of public relations, and this is 20 plus years on working in the industry, in agencies, in-house, for myself, across different sectors, different sizes of clients, working really closely with the industry. My interpretation is that what I do is build relationships, to build trust, to build loyalty. And there is a part in there around reputation management, but that comes as a consequence of building good relationships, being authentic, being ethical, etc. That's not the purpose of what we do, although that is a sort of subsequence, like an outcome of it. And here's a very brief potted history. When I first started working in public relations, some of you will remember this, we used to fax over press releases to news desks, and you'd have to fax it through, you'd have to clip off the wee receipt and then attach it to the press release to prove that you've sent it through, and you'd have to do that to every single news desk. You would then have to bike 35mm what were they called? 35mm little transparencies to picture desks for them to then scan and upload to their computers, and then you would either get them back somehow or you wouldn't. And then just basic, like when from my first PR job was in a lifestyle PR agency, and we worked with some big clients, and I had a desk on my first day. I didn't have a computer. I had a shared computer that was like shared in the office, and it would dial up, that noise. While it was trying to dial up. That's how long ago I worked in PR. We didn't have carrier pigeons, thankfully. But Since then, what has changed? So since then, I've had lots of interns. I've been mentoring people and, new starters in the industry or people that are, kind of stepping up to manager level. And they have been brought up in the industry with technology, but we didn't have that back then. We had very, very basic technology. We only just started using email to speak to people when I started out. So technology has changed our landscape and how we communicate in our industry, but also it has given us massive opportunity for how our clients, how our organizations communicate with their stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, I do not just mean the target audience who would be a broad brushstroke like the consumer. I mean anyone who has a stake interest within your organization or business. So it might be media, it might be your staff, it might be your suppliers, it might be your customers, it would be your, it would be all these different people. And remember, they're all individual people, but they can be categorized into stakeholder groups. Anyway, that was just a by the by also. What else has changed? So consumer habits, there was fast fashion. So you're constantly buying stuff online. You're not trying things on. You're then posting things back. You're not going into shops. What else? Consumer habits. The economy has changed so much. We went through a crash in 2008 when I first started Aura. We've since had probably 2 or 3 recessions that we've talked about, that everyone's been worried about as well. We've had Brexit, obviously the most obvious one, COVID, the war in Ukraine, cost of living crisis right now is happening. But do you know the one thing that actually hasn't changed at all is that we are trying to engage other human beings. Human being to human being. We are trying to speak their language. We are trying to be relevant to them. We're trying to communicate with them, and we're trying to make products and services that are relevant to them, that they will buy, that they will buy into, that they'll pass on or whatever, or make use of. And although people have changed because of all these circumstances, the very fact remains that we are trying to engage with people. We're not trying to engage with dogs and get them to buy anything, but these things have not changed. We still need to listen. And that is a massive skill that everyone should possess in business. But few arguably do properly listen, actively listen. We need to ask. So we need to ask, the consumers or the team or the suppliers, whatever, whoever that audience is, we need to ask them what they want, when they want it, etc. And we need to adapt. We need to work with whatever is happening at that moment in time and adapt accordingly. And that might be changing product services, it might be changing pricing, it might be changing suppliers, but we need to be able to adapt. And if we can adapt, then we have some level of degree of comfort that we're going to be able to carry on as normal. But the other thing that still stands is that we're talking about, people, and we're trying to speak to people and build relationships with people. We're still trying to build relationships with them and still trying to gain trust from them. That has not changed either. And although the landscape has changed in how we might communicate, the principle of communicating and building relationships has not changed at all. And so, one thing I've noticed recently, there's a lot of chat around, not chat, but a lot of things I've come across reading wise and on podcasts has talked about marketing. On Instagram, there's a lot of people talking about marketing, but actually they're not talking about marketing. They're just talking simply about communicating, effectively communicating. Yes. But remember, marketing sells. Marketing will sell a product, will take a product to market and sell it. Communicating is not about necessarily selling. Communicating is about being relevant. It's about being mindful. It's being empathetic. It's about being in the right place at the right time for that person and their needs. So communication doesn't just sit with marketing. Communication is a real specialism on its own right. And public relations is part of the communication makeup or genetics, I would say, where the public relations, building these relationships, like going back to what we were talking about at the start, it's about building relationships and building trust and engaging people, and we do that by communication. So marketing, public relations, communication are on the same level in terms of, talking to people, but marketing sells. Communication is about effective communication, and public relations is about building the relationships. It's about, as it says, public relations. Publics are your stakeholders, and relations being relationships. So actually, I talk a lot about stakeholder relations in a sort of more generic term, because that is identifying stakeholders, mapping stakeholders, scoring stakeholders, and coming up with a stakeholder relation strategy for each individual stakeholder group. But if you talk about employee relations, then clearly you're only talking about that one stakeholder group, your employees. However, your employees will then be split out into different groups, because it's not a broad brushstroke approach. There are no silver bullets for these groups. Everyone has to be looked at individually. And I say they, that's not right. Everyone should be looked at individually, because everyone has their own individual preferences. People work to different timetables or shifts, and something that might suit me wouldn't suit Joe Blogs next door. So stakeholders are different. Stakeholders need to be treated separately. So how does that all make sense then? So as I said, this is thinking out loud stuff. So basically, I then would use data to look at all this stuff, and data is not something that I had at my fingertips 20 years ago when I started out. So the fact that technology is there, and that's one of the first things we identified to change dramatically, is that we have data, insights, analytics, data and analytics at our fingertips on social channels, on websites, etc., e-commerce sites, to give us information which will then give us insights. And those insights are then what helps inform strategy. You can't write a strategy without having the data. And if you don't have the data, then go and get the data. And if that means doing like a sort of stakeholder research survey, or if it means doing product assessments and audits and things like that, then that's what you should do. But you can't move on without data. But coming back to what we're obviously trying to do, it's engaging people. And I talk a lot about people and planet just now, and devising strategies which put people and planet at the heart of those strategies and at the heart of organisation, because your people you have to look after, whether they're your team, your suppliers, whoever those stakeholders are, you have to look after them, you have to know them, and you have to be relevant, you have to be on the same page as them, and you have to live those values so that they are seen and that you actually mean them. And from a planet perspective, people care about the planet, but people also need to have the planet to be able to exist. And so it's as much about caring and having that nice to have as much as the essential. And a lot of the sort of events I'm speaking at, or the blogs and podcasts I'm on, is about talking about like the role of communication in the climate crisis, the role of communication in in sustainability. And finally coming on to that sustainability piece, lots of conversations have happened since I relaunched the business with a real focus on sustainable business, responsible business, ESG, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals after developing the Synergy framework, which is great. Lots of brilliant conversations, and especially when I take people through the framework and explain it all. But what people do not understand is the word sustainable or sustainability. People are using that always in the context of environment, and they're not thinking about sustainable business in developing a team, having a good working culture, paying a living wage, wellness and well-being, all of that type of stuff. These are all things to do with sustainability, because if you take them away and you don't have those ingredients, you do not have a sustainable team, you do not have a sustainable business, you do not have a sustainable client pipeline. Those things are absolutely fundamental to every single business. So what I'm, I suppose, trying to get at is that the word sustainable, the sustainability piece, we need to think of the bigger picture. We need to stop being so narrow-minded, and we need to grab the opportunity to be sustainable businesses, to wear the sustainability heart on our sleeves, and to really take sustainable action. If you think about when you use the word sustainable in a sentence, oh, is that sustainable? That means, does it have life? Does it have legs? Does it have longevity? And the whole point of what I'm trying to do is to future-proof organisations and businesses so they do have a sustainable future. And that does come back to everything that I just mentioned about people, finance, well-being, culture, etc. So, after all that's my sort of thoughts of the day. How PR has changed, what you might think it is, what my interpretation of it is, working in the industry for a number of years, and for what I suppose I hope it's going to be as well, what I hope people are going to come into the industry for and understand the real value of what we do. However, thank you again for tuning in. I see my subscribers are going up, which is awesome. If you could leave a review, that would be fantastic. And if this is the first time you have listened to my podcast, then why don't you go and subscribe just now so that it comes straight to your feed the next time one of my episodes goes live, which is at the moment every couple of weeks. But I suppose if you have any thoughts, ideas, suggestions, obviously I would love to hear from you. It'd be great to kind of incorporate that into my future episodes and my planning. Thank you, and I'll speak to you all soon.